Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, September 25th at just about 8 o'clock in the morning. My name is Larry Cedar, and I'm back with you for another session on Sqanning, spelled Sqanning. Sqanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and hopefully and ultimately mental calm. So that's why we're here. We're here to practice this technique. That's all we do at these sessions. I will basically describe the technique at every session and then practice the technique. There's really no revelations to be had other than whatever may pop into my mind regarding a certain aspect of the technique. You can go to any of the previous sessions on the Sqanning Facebook page, Sqanning, or the YouTube page, and you can see previous sessions and they will be hopefully just as effective. However, I do like to do it live. Just in case anyone has any questions, you can type in. I can answer them right here during the session. And also, as I said, to just practice and see whatever insights come to me as I'm practicing. I'm a little out of breath, and I'm going to tell you why. I just worked out. And I'm going to talk a little bit about exercise today to start this session. I'm still out of breath. Normally what I do is I do a session and then I work out. I exercise fairly regularly. Because after a session I'm more relaxed and the workout is more effective. Today I decided to work out first because I have an appointment early this morning, and I wanted to get it out of the way. And I want to talk about what exercise is and what it does for you in relation to the concept of contraction, squeeze your hands together, and expansion. We've talked a lot about that in these sessions. How, according to a man named Thaddeus Golas, Golas, who wrote The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, on which I based this technique, the universe can be divided into two basic processes: contraction, squeeze your hands together, and expansion, release. Everything in the universe alternates at any given moment between those two states of being, contraction or expansion. Everything you see, feel, do, say, talk, think about is either in a state of contraction or expansion or alternating between the two. That includes us. Sorry, I'm out of breath again. I'll explain why in a minute. That includes us, our entire being. Expansion, contraction, contraction. Muscles can either contract or expand. Our breathing process is an expansion followed by a contraction. So I want to clarify a misconception people may have had in terms of this technique, and that is that we just want to get to a totally expanded state all the time. No. Life is a vacillation between contraction and expansion. This technique, which I developed to help myself and ultimately anyone else who might find it effective, is to bring you out of a state of contraction when you are overly contracted, to bring yourself back into a state of expansion so that you may find a balanced center. That's the purpose of this technique. Because we tend to contract a lot more than we expand. We're used to contracting. Contracting is getting up, going to work, writing emails, posting, tweeting, thinking, arguing, building things. These are contractions, the bringing together materials, thoughts, ideas to advance a goal, an agenda. And we do that a lot. What we get bad at is expanding, the opposite, releasing, letting go, becoming permeable, agreeable, accepting, opening our eyes, listening, becoming available, becoming neutral. That's expansion. We do a lot less of that. If we did more expanding, we could be more balanced. So that's the purpose of this technique, is to bring us back into a state of a more expanded, balanced existence. So now let's talk about exercise. I exercise regularly, not just for my body, but for my mind. I find it clears my mind. I find it centers me. I find it does a lot of things for me. And I thought about, how does exercise relate to the subject of this contraction, expansion continuum? Well, exercise is so perfect because it's a combination of both. We need both in life. You need to be good at contracting. That's building things. That's doing your job. That's forming sentences and words. Having ideas, going places, doing things. That's contracting, the bringing together of thoughts, materials, ideas to advance an agenda or a goal. We need to be good at contraction. I never want to give the impression that contraction is bad. It's only when we're out of balance, that we're overly contracted, then we become stuck, rigid, unwilling to be accepting, impermeable, solid, argumentative, difficult, rigid, frozen. That's what we want to avoid. That's why we learn to expand. But think about exercise. Muscles can either contract or release. The muscles are the perfect metaphor for this contraction-expansion theory. They can either contract or expand, and that's what they do all day. Contract, expand, contract, expand. Why do you go to a masseuse? Because you become overly contracted. Okay? So exercise is an excellent thing for the human body, for our existence, because it's a combination of both. You contract You use the muscle to strengthen it, to get it better at contracting. We lift weights, we run, we strengthen the heart to get it better at contracting. But at the same time, when you're exercising, you have to breathe. So it's forcing your lungs to what? Expand. So exercise is the perfect metaphor because it is a very intense form of contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. And it's taking you to the extremes of that continuum. It's taking your muscles past a point of contraction where they're normally comfortable. When you exert yourself, I never want to work out initially because it's going to be hard. But I know that if I extend the capacity of my muscles, if I learn to contract them even better, I'll be stronger in my life. At the same time, it's forcing you to breathe more deeply than you normally do. So it's forcing you to expand. When you wake up in the morning, you tend to be sluggish. But after you've exercised, your lungs have expanded, your blood is circulating, everything is more open. So exercise is the perfect aid to life because it extends your range, shall we say. It makes you better able to contract, and it makes you better able to expand. It increases your capacity to do both. So that's why it's better for your body and your mind. And that's any form of exercise. Walking is fine. Anything that, as they say, gets the heart pumping. When we get in trouble is when we become sedentary. We've stopped contracting, we've stopped expanding. We're just doing, basically nothing. And our muscles become weak. Our breathing capacity is lessened. Our blood pressure goes up because our capillaries and arteries are now constricting. And so every time your heart pumps, it takes more pressure to get the blood through to your extremities. So exercise is an excellent metaphor. I just wanted to make that point as it relates to this technique. So now let's get back to the technique. As I said, Thaddeus Golas said, the universe is made up of two basic processes: contraction, squeeze your hands together, and expansion, release. It's so simple. And the reason we start this technique of scanning, which I call it, which is basically means scanning your body, looking for muscular tension that you can release. We start this way to remind ourselves that this is us. This is the perfect metaphor for us here in the world. We are usually contracted, squeeze. Now hold that as tight as you can for a little while till I say release. So this is what we do all day. 90% of our day is contracting, going to work, making phone calls, having conversations, arguing about politics, about life, about climate change, about the world, getting mad, getting angry, being happy, celebrating, hugging each other. Contractions, contractions, contractions. We get really good at that because to be contracted is to be alive. That's okay. It's a great thing. What happens though, and you can see now as you're holding your hands tightly together, is that it begins to get a little tiring and your hands begin to feel a little rigid, a little stiff. You're finding yourself not so comfortable. I always like to say the simplest definition of contraction is that you feel bad. I mean, overly contracted. You feel bad. You feel like this is too much. I'm feeling limited. I'm feeling closed off. I'm feeling rigid. I'm feeling impermeable. I'm feeling in a state of no. So if you feel bad, you're probably over-contracted. So how do we change that? Simple. We do the opposite. We expand. 3, 2, 1, release. Just let go. Let your hands drop into your lap and take a deep, deep breath. And take one more. And another. And then sit for 15 seconds in absolute stillness and silence. And when I say stillness, I mean frozen. Keep breathing though. Deep breath. Now, what's the distinction between sitting and sitting perfectly still? I want you to think about that for a second. Think about how many times in your day you sit perfectly still. I'm not talking about, okay, I'm sitting, not doing anything, looking around, sitting still. No. I'm talking about frozen. Watch. How many times a day do you do that? Rarely. If you're me, never. I tend to be kind of hyperactive and agitated, so I'm always on the move. So when you sit perfectly still, when you literally freeze, it's like that old kids game of red light, green light. Kid turns around and says, red light, and everyone freezes. When you sit perfectly still, that sends a message to your body, your spirit, and your mind. Something is different. I've stopped doing what I've been doing completely. I'm not doing anything. I'm frozen. And your body kind of pays attention to that, and it says something's going on, something's different. So what you're doing when you freeze is you're sending your body a signal. We are going to stop doing. As I said, we spend 90% of our day contracting, doing, speaking, talking, posting, going, coming, all sorts of things. So when you stop, you're sending a signal to your body, things are about to change. It's like a car. You're moving in this direction. You want to go back in the other direction, but first you've got to stop, turn around, and go back the other way. Now someone could say, well, you can make a big circle, but just for argument's sake, let's say you have to stop, turn around, and go the other way. So when we freeze, we have stopped. It's very important as part of this process to recognize that if you are either contracting or expanding, and note, you can't do both at the same time. When you stop contracting, you've taken your first step towards expanding. So that's why we do the 3 what I call preliminary steps. Excuse me, I'm still kind of sweaty from my workout. 3 preliminary steps. We squeeze our hands together. That's a metaphor for ourselves. It's really useful to be able to step outside yourself sometime. We get so caught up in our own thoughts and ideas that it's useful to be able to go, okay, I'm stepping outside myself. I'm going to take a look at myself and what's going on with me today. So this is you. Step outside yourself and put everything you are into your hands and squeeze. That's you. You're contracted. Okay, look at yourself. That's okay. You're strong. You're effective. You're active. You do. You're successful. You make things happen. You argue. You debate. You go to work. You write emails. This is you. You're effective. You're contracting. That's okay. But note how you can become overly contracted. So you're taking a look at yourself and you're saying, okay, that's me. I know I don't feel good. I think I may be over contracted. Here I am. This is what I'm doing. And squeeze really tight so you really feel it. And then on your own count, 3, 2, 1, you can do it. Release. You have the power. You have the choice. Things will happen to you throughout your entire life that you have absolutely no control over. That's just life. But you always have the power to change your state of consciousness, to move from a state of contraction to expansion. This is a metaphor for what I call that binary state. You can either be contracting or expanding. So we start by squeezing our hands and saying, I can change my state of consciousness. 3, 2, 1, release. Let your hands drop to your sides. Now, note the change and then take 3 deep breaths, because breaths, as I said about exercise, are inherently expansive. So we've stopped doing what we were doing, and we're going to take 3 deep breaths to bring our body, to bring our spirit, our consciousness into an expanded state. We're forcing that change. It's a sort of a forceful shift, because when you are in a contracted state, you tend to want to hang on to it. It's like a security blanket. You don't want to let go. It feels safe. I've been doing this. It's always worked for me. I'm not going to stop now. Even if it's bad for me, I'm going to keep doing the same thing over and over again because I don't know what else to do. Well, here's what you do. You expand. 3, 2, 1, release, and take those 3 expansive breaths as deep as you can. Forcefully exhale. 1 more. And then sit for 15 seconds, as I said, in absolute frozen stillness and silence. Keep breathing. So we've sent our body several signals that we're heading in a different direction. Reminded ourselves we're contracted and we let go and expanded. Took 3 expansive breaths and sat in stillness, absolute stillness and silence. Now, why silence? Again, like stillness, how often, how many times during the day do you take a moment of silence? I'm not an extremely religious person, but I am fairly religious. I mean, I don't practice a lot of the practices of my religion, but I am spiritual, very spiritual. And one of my favorite moments is most religious services at some point have a moment of silence. Why do I like it? Because it detaches you from all the external processes that you've hooked yourself into, that you think define you. That includes your thoughts. We define ourselves by our work, our money, our job, our relationships, our material possessions, the thoughts we have, the mantras we recite, even the religions that we practice. We define ourselves. This is me. I built this structure. Now, when you become silent, you detach yourself from all of that. You say, I'm nothing. I'm nothing but what I am. Silence is incredibly powerful because it teaches us. Intuitively, we think to learn we must be doing, we must be reading, we must absorb, we must study, we must take part in different processes. We just assume that we're nothing without that. Silence reminds us that we're everything without that. In silence is where we truly live. In silence is where we truly exist. That's where we just are. That's where you experience your essence, in silence. And I mentioned this yesterday, you'll find that as I do these sessions, you'll find me taking longer and longer pauses. It's because intuitively, and I've been practicing this for years, but I still learn from every single session. I will never master this completely. I learn in every session that as I begin to expand through the breaths, through the stillness, through the silence, I begin to realize that, oh, it's just me here. And it's very reassuring. And it's very calming, because all the things I thought define me don't really exist. This exists. This is me. And I begin to intuitively remember that this is the root of it all. Just this. And yes, I take a breath because it's a relief. It's a relief. You know, we go through life just feeling as though I must do this, I must do that, I must say this, I must listen to this, I must. To exist, to exist. I'll perish if I don't do X, Y, and Z. I am hooked into, I am defined by, particularly these days, and I don't mean to be critical, but the social networks have created a sensation that unless we are online, posting, tweeting, liking, whatever, chatting, unless we're plugged into the social networks, we don't exist. And so we are compulsively log on. So I say relief because when I have detached myself from everything, if just for a moment, in particular the social networks, which I'm on right now, of course, I feel a sense of peace and relief because I don't have to do that, to be, to exist, to feel, to experience who and what I am. And it's a relief. It's a relief. For everything that we do all day long, all over the city, all over the country, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, there is room in your life for a moment of stillness and silence. Give yourself 1, 2, 3 moments a day to just experience being. And I'm sorry to say, because I consider myself somewhat of a experienced practitioner of this, but that compulsion to involve myself in the world, in the processes around me, on a 24-hour basis, and I mean when I'm lying in bed at night trying to sleep, this constant obsession with defining myself by what I am involved in, fixing, doing, participating in, whatever defines me, is a very difficult thing to let go of. And it doesn't happen, for me anyway, naturally. I have to do this technique to achieve this state. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but it's true. It's why I developed the technique, so that I could, at least a few times a day, find my way back to myself. Find my way back to myself. David Lynch is a very serious practitioner of transcendental meditation, I believe it is. And I have a basic understanding what transcendental meditation is. I'm no expert by any means, but it's meditating on some form, and I think you're given a mantra. I'm a supporter of any form of spiritual practice which brings you to a calmer, more centered, more enlightened state. So I support it 100%. But I do believe I've heard him say at some point that if we could get everyone in the world to meditate 5-10 minutes a day, the world would be a better place. And I believe that. I believe that. I look at the news, I see what's going on in the world politically. It's very upsetting for everyone on all sides of the argument. And I see people are very hooked in to philosophies, political or otherwise, and they have hardened their structure. They've taken a position. I always say that if this is you contracted and this is someone else contracted, you will never come together. It's only when you expand and make room for the others that you can merge and learn to live together with each other. Ultimately, we must. We have to learn on some level to accept and understand each other, or we'll just destroy each other. That's what happens. When everyone takes a solid, impermeable position, our only choice, if we wish to exist, is to destroy the other. We can't tolerate their existence. We can't tolerate it. So our only choice in our minds, in our spirits, is to destroy the other. And I sense that's what's happening on a certain level in the world. It's only when we expand that we can come together once again and solve our problems. So again, getting back to David Lynch, I do believe that if people would take more time to experience themselves, to find themselves, to detach themselves from these external processes, to become more open, permeable, accepting, to open their eyes to what is true and real in the world, as opposed to denying it and trying to fight it, I think the world could be a better place. But what do I know? So, I started this session by saying I was going to expand after having exercised, and I feel like I have. I feel calmer, I feel more still, and I feel better, which is the goal. I normally at this point would go into the incremental muscular release section of the process, but I do have an appointment basically in a half an hour. So I'm going to proceed to wrap this up. I hope this has been helpful on some level. Again, on a selfish level, I do these sessions for me because I need it. And I share it with you in the hopes that it will benefit you as well, that it will be of some value to you as well. We're all so different. We're all so different on the one hand. On the other hand, we're all exactly the same. So who knows? In any case, I will repost this session on my Facebook page. I will also repost it on my Sqanning Facebook page, Sqanning. Go there and like and follow if you want news of new sessions. And I always end every session with rule number 1. Love yourself. Love yourself. This is what you were given. So just love yourself. Love is the most expansive act you can take in the universe, and start by loving yourself. And then when you have enough love within you that it's extra and there's spilling over, then please share it with others, because we could all use it, especially these days. Thanks. Have a great day. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.